The crack of metal splitting in the night was so sharp it jolted me upright. Like a gunshot, I knew that sound. The gate lock snapping from my window, the reflection of the lake shimmered under the porch light. But it wasn't the calm retreat I'd built for peace. Headlights were lined up down the gravel drive like a parade. Engines rumbling, doors slamming, laughter already echoing across the water. And at the center of it all stood him. Tall, broad-shouldered, barely 35 but carrying himself like he owned the world. Like rules were made to be bent under his thumb. The HOA president, the man who had spent months sneering at me in meetings, telling me an old man didn't need more land than he could mow in a day. And now he had done the unthinkable, broke the lock to my lakefront lodge and let a flood of strangers pour inside, one after another, like ants rushing toward sugar. The gravel crunched under 100 shoes, the clink of glass bottles mixed with music blaring from car speakers, and the air itself felt invaded, thick with gasoline fumes, cigarette smoke, and voices that did not belong here. This was supposed to be my sanctuary. 70 years old, I'd worked my whole life to have a place where the mornings were only broken by loons across the lake, where I could cast a line and sit on the dock with nothing but silence. And now it was a circus I hadn't invited. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, but before I dialed, I froze at the sight of what they were doing. Some of the guests, kids drunk already, were climbing onto the dock, pushing each other toward the water, beer cans floating like buoys, their laughter high-pitched and reckless. Another group was dragging folding tables from the back of a pickup, slamming them into the grass where I'd planted azaleas last spring, their boots grinding petals into dirt without a thought. And him, the president, he stood with his arms crossed, smirk stretched wide as though he'd finally claimed his victory over the old-timer who wouldn't fall in line. I stormed out onto the porch, bare feet slapping against the wood, my voice louder than I thought I still had in me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The music didn't stop. The laughter didn't stop, but a few heads turned. And then, as though rehearsed, they went back to their chaos like I wasn't even there. And his smirk only deepened. "Relax," he said, voice carrying over the noise with a practiced authority. "It's just a party. Nobody's hurting anything." I felt the anger pound in my chest, but beneath it, the icy grip of fear. This wasn't just one or two trespassers I could chase off with a warning. There were dozens, maybe 100, and I was just one old man standing in the dark. The bass thumped through the ground like an earthquake. The smell of spilled beer and burning charcoal started to mix with the crisp lake air I used to love. And in that moment, I realized something bone deep. If I didn't act fast, this wouldn't just be a ruined night. It would be the beginning of the end of everything I'd built here. I tightened my grip on the phone, thumb hovering over the green button. Because this wasn't just trespassing, this was a takeover. And I had one question rattling in my head, echoing louder than the music, louder than his smug grin, louder than the chaos exploding across my land. Would the police get here in time, or was I about to lose my sanctuary forever? I should probably start at the beginning, before the night my gate lock snapped like dry bone, before the 100 strangers trampled my azaleas into the dirt. My name's Walter. I'm 70 years old. I'm not the type who looks for trouble anymore. My knees ache in the mornings. My shoulders complain if I lift more than a sack of firewood. And my hearing isn't what it used to be. But I've got enough life left in me to hold on to the one thing I worked for my entire career. This lodge, it sits on the north shore of Pinecrest Lake. A cedar-framed home I built with my own hands when I was 42. The walls smell of pine resin in the summer, the floors creak in the winter, and from the dock you can see the fog curl across the water when the sun first breaks through. I wanted this place to be my legacy, something my kids could bring their kids to, one quiet corner of the world that was mine. I used to believe property lines meant something. Out here, fences, trees, and water told neighbors where respect started and ended. That was before the new HOA president moved in. His name was Travis, 35 years old, sharp haircut, the kind of guy who wore pressed polo shirts even on weekends. He arrived in a brand new SUV with a smile so wide it felt rehearsed. Everyone at the Lakefront development seemed to fall for his charm at first. He was young, ambitious, said he wanted to modernize the community. He talked about rules and standards as if he were delivering some kind of sermon. To me, it sounded like control. I'd been part of this neighborhood association since the beginning, back when it was just a handful of us keeping the roads clear in the winter and agreeing not to leave boats tied up all year. We'd voted in leaders who cared about balance, who understood that we bought these properties for privacy and freedom. Travis didn't see it that way. He saw power. The first warning came in small. A letter in my mailbox. The paper smelled like fresh ink, his name bold at the bottom. Your dock does not meet HOA appearance standards. I stared at that letter for a long time. My dock was older, sure. The boards weathered silver, bolts rusted in places, but it was sturdy and safe. I'd sanded it every spring, replaced slats where needed, and more importantly, it was my dock. I ignored that letter. But more came, one about the improper placement of trash bins, another about grass height exceeding neighborhood limits, then a fine, $75 for parking my truck too close to the roadside. At first I thought it was just bureaucracy. I'd seen plenty of petty managers in my working life, but the tone of his letters shifted, sharper, mocking at times. Perhaps you need assistance maintaining your property at your age. That was when I realized it wasn't about rules. It was about me. I had lived here longer than he'd been alive. And yet, he strutted into meetings, waving violation slips like badges, looking down his nose at me as though I were some old relic who needed to be managed into silence. Neighbors noticed, but few said anything. Some avoided my eyes, others gave me those pitying half-smiles. People like Travis. He organized barbecues, promised new landscaping around the shared beach area, and talked about increasing property values. His charm made it hard to call him what he really was, a bully. But in every smile, every sir he tossed my way, I could feel the contempt. And I'll admit, some nights I sat on the porch, staring at the moonlit lake, wondering if I was just too stubborn. Maybe I should have fixed the dock the way he wanted. Maybe I should have mowed the grass twice a week like he demanded. Maybe I should have kept my truck hidden behind the garage line. But then I'd remember why I bought this lodge in the first place. It wasn't for him. It wasn't for property values. It was for peace, for dignity, for the right to sit in silence without someone telling me I wasn't enough. Still, the letters piled up. The fines grew. Neighbors whispered, but no one challenged him, and Travis kept smiling. I should have known it wouldn't stop there. I should have seen the way he eyed my land during the summer cookout, how he complimented the lodge with that glint in his eyes, like he was already imagining what he'd do with it if it were his. And maybe, deep down, I did know. Maybe I just didn't want to believe that one man's arrogance could grow big enough to swallow a whole community. But I was wrong, dead wrong. Because Travis wasn't satisfied with paper fines and thinly veiled insults. He wanted control. He wanted to break me, and the night he broke that lock, I understood that everything leading up to it, the letters, the fines, the whispers, had been nothing more than a warm-up. Travis didn't stop after the letters. If anything, he doubled down. By the time autumn rolled across Pinecrest Lake, I had received more notices than junk mail. The fines stacked so high I had to keep a shoebox just to hold them. Neighbors would nod politely when they saw me at the general store, but their eyes slid away quick. They were afraid of him, or maybe they were afraid of being next. One morning, I woke to find a bright orange sticker slapped on my truck windshield. Vehicle non-compliant, HOA violation. I peeled it off with shaking hands. My old Ford wasn't flashy, but it ran fine. It wasn't leaking oil, wasn't blocking anyone's path. But to Travis, it wasn't about rules. It was about sending a message. That night I saw him walking the gravel lane with a clipboard, shining a flashlight over fences and lawns like a sheriff on patrol. His polo shirt was crisp, even in the damp night air. His shadow stretched long under the street lamp as if he were twice the man he thought he was. He caught me watching and smiled, raising his hand like we were old friends. It was the smile that got me, wide, confident, practiced, the kind of smile that said, "You can't touch me." The harassment wasn't just on paper. One afternoon in early October, I found my dock ropes cut. The rowboat I kept tied there had drifted into the reeds, half flooded, scraping against rocks. I pulled it out with aching arms, muttering curses into the wind. The ropes weren't frayed. They were sliced clean. I knew who did it. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. That night, I wrote a note in my journal. He's testing me. He wants me to snap first, but I didn't snap. I patched the ropes, bailed the boat, and sat on the dock with a thermos of coffee, watching the moon ripple on the water. My lodge was still mine. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. The next blow came at a community meeting. I sat in the back, as I always did, arms crossed, listening to neighbors chatter about beach maintenance and snow plowing. When the floor opened, Travis stood tall at the podium, papers neatly stacked in front of him. "I'd like to bring up a proposal," he said, voice smooth. "The association should consider repurposing underutilized properties for community benefit." My stomach dropped. I knew where this was going. He glanced straight at me, eyes gleaming. "Some lots, while scenic, aren't maintained to modern standards. They drag down the overall image of Pinecrest." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few people glanced at me, others at their feet. Then he smiled. That smile again. "In cases where property owners are unable or unwilling to comply with standards, perhaps the HOA should pursue legal transfer for the greater good of the community." I gripped the chair so hard my knuckles went white. He was saying it out loud now. He wanted my lodge. I stood, voice louder than I expected. "This is my land. I built that lodge with my hands. You don't get to call it underutilized just because you want it." Silence fell. Heavy, awkward silence. Travis's smirk didn't fade. "Of course, Walter. No one is targeting you. This is just about progress." But everyone in that room knew it was about me. The weeks that followed were worse. My mailbox was vandalized twice. The tires of my truck were slashed once. I reported it to the sheriff's office, but without proof, they just took notes and gave sympathetic looks. Neighbors stopped visiting. One woman, Helen, whispered to me at the store, "Careful, Walter, he's making examples," before hurrying away like she'd said too much. The isolation gnawed at me. Nights were the worst, the wind howling off the lake, my thoughts circling like wolves. Had I made a mistake buying here? Had I underestimated what power could do in the wrong hands? But every time doubt sank its teeth in, I'd walk down to the dock, feel the wood under my feet, breathe the sharp scent of pine, and remind myself, this was mine. My father worked 2 jobs to keep us fed. I worked 40 years to keep my promise that my family would have something better. No smirking 35-year-old dictator was going to take that away. Then came the intimidation in broad daylight. I was raking leaves near the porch when I heard the crunch of gravel. Tires, close I turned, rake still in hand. Travis's SUV rolled up the drive. He didn't get out right away, just sat there, engine purring. Finally, the door opened and he stepped out, sunglasses gleaming despite the overcast sky. "Afternoon," he said, voice dripping false warmth. "Lot of work for a man your age." I clenched the rake tighter. "What do you want?" He walked slowly, surveying my property like a buyer at an auction. "Just checking in. The board's concerned about deterioration." He gestured at the dock, the grass, the lodge itself. "Would be a shame if you couldn't keep up." "I'm fine," I said flatly. He tilted his head, smile sharp. "Are you?" "Maybe it's time to consider alternatives. The HOA could take this off your hands. We'd make sure it was appreciated." My blood boiled. "Over my dead body." His smile didn't falter. He just slid his sunglasses back into place. "We'll see." Then he got in his SUV, gravel spitting under the tires as he left. That winter was long and brutal. Snow piled high, roads icy. The kind of winter that tests your bones. I kept mostly to myself, shoveling what I could, chopping wood for the stove. But even then, the harassment found me. Fines for snow left too long on the drive. Notices for improperly stacked firewood. Warnings about unsightly icicles on the roof edge. Petty, endless, suffocating. I paid some, ignored others. but every slip of paper was a reminder. He wasn't letting go. By spring, the tension had turned thick as fog across the lake, and that's when he made his boldest move yet. A letter certified, signature required. Inside, notice of intent to reclaim property for community use. The words burned in my hands. They weren't legal, not yet, but they were a declaration of war. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee gone cold, staring at that letter. The ticking of the wall clock felt deafening. My heart pounded against my ribs, and for the first time, I wondered if maybe he could win. Then I looked out the window at the lake, the water glittering, the dock stretching like a bridge to freedom, and I knew I couldn't give up. Not now, not ever. Travis thought he was untouchable. He thought fear would wear me down, but he had underestimated one thing. A man who's worked his whole life for something doesn't let it go without a fight. The night of the party wasn't just a violation. It was the breaking point. I can still hear it if I close my eyes. The bass rattling through my porch planks, the laughter of drunk strangers echoing across the lake, Travis's smirk glowing under the floodlight like a mask of victory. But this time, he'd gone too far. Breaking a gate lock was trespassing. Inviting 100 strangers into my lodge was criminal, and I wasn't about to let him spin it into community benefit. I dialed 911 with a hand steadier than I expected. My voice came out firm, clipped. "This is Walter Jenkins, Pinecrest Lake, North Shore. I've got trespassers on my property. The HOA president broke my lock and brought them here. The dispatcher asked questions, numbers, safety, weapons. My answers were short. At least 100 trespassing, loud disorder, no weapons I can see." My pulse hammered, but I felt a strange calm, because for the first time in months, I wasn't just reacting, I was taking the fight to him. While I waited for the sirens, I grabbed the folder I'd kept hidden in my desk drawer for months inside. Every letter, every fine, every notice, every photo I'd taken of vandalized mailboxes, slashed tires, cut dock ropes. I'd even recorded him once. His SUV idling while he told me the HOA could take this off your hands. I wasn't sure if it would hold up in court, but I knew one thing. It painted a picture of a man who believed himself untouchable. And tonight, I was going to tear that picture down. The party raged louder. Fireworks now, sparks bursting over the lake, their colors shimmering in the water. Guests cheered, beer bottles smashed on the dock. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. This wasn't just noise anymore. It was a desecration. Then, the sound I'd been waiting for. Sirens, faint at first, then growing stronger. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees. The laughter stuttered. The music cut off like someone had yanked the cord Travis's head whipped around. I'll never forget his face, that confident smirk faltering, the first crack of doubt spreading across his features. "Everybody, calm down," he barked, raising his arms. "It's fine. It's just noise complaints." But it wasn't just noise complaints. Not this time. The deputies spilled onto the property, flashlights sweeping across faces. People froze mid-sip, mid-dance, mid-laugh, suddenly aware of where they were and who they weren't supposed to be. An officer approached me on the porch. "Sir, you made the call?" "Yes," I said, voice steady. "This is my property. They broke my gate lock and trespassed." I pointed straight at Travis. "And he's the one who led them." The officer turned, eyes narrowing. "Sir, is that true?" Travis laughed, strained but still trying. "Officer, with respect, this is community land. The association—" "No," I cut in, loud enough to silence him. "This is deeded private property. I've got the papers inside and I've got months of harassment documented. From him." I handed over the folder. The officer flipped through pages. His expression tightening, Travis's face drained of color. "This is ridiculous. He's confused. But the crowd was watching now. Neighbors among the guests, whispering, shifting uneasily. His power fed on their silence. And for the first time, they weren't silent. They were seeing him exposed. The lead deputy's voice cut sharply through the night. "Sir, step aside. We're going to need to have a serious conversation about property rights and criminal trespass." Murmurs rippled. People started leaving in a rush, slipping into cars, peeling away down the gravel road. The party collapsed like a tent with its poles kicked out. Travis stood there, jaw clenched, fists tight at his sides. "You don't understand," he hissed. "I run this community." I stepped forward, eyes locked on his. "No, you don't." Not anymore. The deputies took statements, photographed the broken lock, the bottles in the trampled garden. They assured me charges would be filed. Trespassing, vandalism, maybe more, depending on evidence, Travis tried to argue, his voice rising, cracking, but every word only dug him deeper. The smirk was gone. His shirt rumpled, hair mussed, face red with frustration. He didn't look like a leader anymore. He looked like a child caught with his hand in the jar. And when the deputies finally guided him toward the squad car for questioning, the crowd's silence was deafening. No one defended him. No one looked him in the eye. He was alone. But the climax didn't end with flashing lights or paperwork. It came a week later at the emergency HOA meeting. The room was packed, chairs scraping, whispers buzzing. I sat in the back again, folder in my lap. But this time I wasn't alone. A handful of neighbors who'd once avoided my eyes now sat beside me, nodding tight encouragement. The board called the meeting to order. Faces stiff, voices formal. They read out the charges against Travis: criminal trespass, property damage, and abuse of authority. The evidence I'd handed over had been copied and distributed. His words, his threats, his fines, all laid bare. When they asked if anyone wished to speak, I stood. I felt 70 years of weight in my bones, but also 70 years of grit. I told them about the letters, about the fines, about the rope cut clean, about the night he drove up my lane, just to tell me I was too old to belong here. I spoke slowly, steadily, letting each detail settle into the silence. Then I ended with this. This lodge isn't just wood and nails. It's my life's work. It's my family's legacy, and no man, not one who smirks at rules, not one who abuses neighbors, not one who thinks power means ownership, has the right to take that away. The room erupted not in applause, not in jeers, but in something stronger. Agreement one by one. People nodded, spoke up, admitted they'd been afraid, but had seen the same bullying, the same arrogance in Travis. He sat slumped at the table, eyes darting, face pale. Every ounce of that cocky swagger drained out of him. When the vote came, it wasn't close. The board stripped him of his position, banned him from holding any office again, and issued a formal censure. He was done. That night, walking out of that meeting, I breathed easier than I had in months. The air was crisp, the stars sharp above the lake. For the first time in a long time, I felt like Pinecrest was home again, because the climax wasn't just about stopping him, it was about proving to him, to the neighbors, to myself, that I wasn't powerless. That dignity doesn't age. That legacy can't be bullied out of a man. And as I stepped onto my porch, the wood groaning familiar under my feet, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the turning point.